Welcome, welcome. This is Phoenix Rose at HHREC. Today I have a very special guest with me. Please introduce yourself, my friend.
So I am Luna Ramos. I'm from Peers. I'm the program coordinator for the Latina Community Wellness Program. And I'm here to promote my program.
All right, the Latina Wellness Program. Do me a favor. Tell me what PEERS is an acronym for, nice and slow.
Yeah, so Peers Engaging and Envisioning and Recovery Services. So we've been an organization, I believe, for a little over 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we're really just about peer counseling and peer mental health.
Okay.
And meeting people where they're at. So we have like low barriers to entries. We don't ask for insurance. We just want people to come to us and to open up.
Just be available.
Yeah.
We are here for you. PEERS Envisioning. Do it one more time slow, please.
Peers Envisioning and Engaging in Recovery Services.
PEERS Envisioning and Engaging in Recovery Services.
Yeah. And that's recovery from like whatever it may be.
Life.
Yeah.
When life gets to lifing.
Yeah.
You need some help. You need some help from your peers. All right. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Where are you originally from?
So I'm from the East Bay. I'm from Concord. I'm born and raised in the East Bay and really proud to be from here and to do work here. I love the Bay Area. I love the people here. I love the culture
people are
here.
From the Bay.
And I love the history here too.
Okay. What about the history do you love in particular? Anything?
I think it just, in my mind and in my perspective, has always been this really diverse place where like a lot of people have mattered and a lot of people have contributed to the culture here.
Absolutely.
And I see people fighting for that to remain true. And that's sweet to me. And I love communities like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're holding on for our community.
Yeah.
Let me see. Okay, now your family is from Mexico.
Yeah.
Correct?
So my parents and my oldest sisters, I have 3 older sisters, the two oldest ones were born and raised in Mexico and came here.
Okay.
So that's like my framework. That's like, grew up in a immigrant household and many people can relate to that. And I think, it was an interesting experience and it was a large experience. Yeah.
A large experience being from an immigrant household.
Yeah.
What would you say is kind of your takeaway, the positive part of being from an immigrant household?
I think a lot of things weren't like necessarily given to us. Like we all learned that we had to work for things we wanted. And also learn that like all the things we wanted were possible for us. Which like is a message you received in the household, but I think in school or in like in culture, like you're not really taught that.
You aren't.
But within the household, we're like, like if you want something, like you can do it. Like why
Anything
wouldn't
is
you
possible.
be able to, become a teacher, go into law, become a nurse?
Anything you want.
Yeah.
Anything is possible. What a great household message to have. Okay, now it was wonderful growing up as well, but there were also some things in your life that caused you to have what you say is a mental health issue.
Yeah. So
tell me about that, please.
Like many people, I struggle with anxiety and depression. And I'd say like as a young adult, I have things sorted out more than I used to. But as a child in like an immigrant household and a Latino household, like the resources were not there. Like even if my parents wanted to come to me in like a warm way and ask me about like the feelings I was feeling, they didn't necessarily actually know how to.
Yeah.
They weren't taught that by their parents. They weren't taught that by their grandparents. So it was a lot of figuring out how to like self-regulate like as a child, but like by yourself. So like I'm ultimately in the mental health field because of my childhood experience, but I was a very sensitive child who needed some help. So,
yes,
I'm out here for all the sensitive people who also need help.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like that is happening in a lot of households where the parents don't necessarily know how to approach their child and ask them what's wrong. I don't feel like that was instilled in many people growing up. When did you realize you had a mental health issue? What was your moment? You're like, oh, this is something that I need to pay attention to and I can fix it or help it.
I think really early on, to be honest, I've heard some like participants in my program say that they've noticed something was wrong since they were in kindergarten.
Okay.
I wasn't as early as that, but like in middle school, like once I was like 10 or 11, I was like, something is like very wrong. And I think in middle schools is when you're having not the most deep conversations with your friends, but you're texting them after school, you're messaging them on your apps, talking a little bit about your mental state. And, some friends weren't feeling the same things I was feeling. So I knew there was a disconnect there.
All right.
And then some friends were feeling similar things. Yeah. And I also was really on like Tumblr, like this blogging platform. And I think I vaguely got a sense of what mental health was or what depression was, just from seeing people post on there. And like people would post like short stories about themselves or just like blog. People would blog.
Okay.
Yeah. Like their like private journal entries.
So I guess the presence of social media kind of helped you identify what you were going through.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that works. Social media is good in that sense. Okay, let's move forward. The Latine Mental Health Fellowship. Now, this is an umbrella underneath the Peers Initial Foundation. Okay, please tell me a little bit about that. How long have you been running the Latine Mental Health Fellowship?
So I actually think we're in January now. I think the first meeting was either in late October, early November.
Ooh, brand new.
So I've actually had 2 meetings with the participants, but I really am fond of them. They're really like insightful and like beautiful and intelligent people. I started it. Well, it's a part of like something we have to do for the county and because of the programming. So it's initially supposed to be called an action team, but we named it fellowship because it would attract more people in that way, you know? And it did attract a lot of people. And we kind of just meet on Zoom or we do video conferencing and we meet once a month and we kind of just talk about what we're holding on to. And I provide some structure, but usually the conversation just flows to what people are needing like in that moment. And everyone in there is like Latinx, some people are queer, some people are trans, and I think we all relate to one another. And then something that is sweet about my role at Peers that I haven't experienced at other workplaces is because it's peer mental health counseling, even as a facilitator, you're really welcome and encouraged to share your own narrative.
Absolutely.
Versus in other settings, it's a little more sanitized. I think, when you're a therapist, like you often have to pretend you don't have like
your own set of
issues. It's like a little like unprofessional too. Like in this case, like it's welcome. It's actually where like the magic and the sweetness of the programming comes from.
Exactly. And people are more apt to receive help or anything if they understand that you've kind of been through the same thing. Now, you said that you guys can all relate being in the Latinx community. You mentioned Latinas, Latinos, and then you said trans and the LGBT community. How do you all relate and correlate versus the Latin community as well as the trans and LGBTQ community?
I think when it comes to this, like our racial and ethnic background, we have a little bit of a baseline, but we're all really different. But I think we still respect one another. And there are like common threads that weave through all of us that we feel like, one person may be trans and like share something about their upbringing. And like a cis person will still feel seen by that because that wasn't necessarily attached to that person's identity, you know? Like that person, like we all have Latina parents. We all have Latina grandparents and family and have this shared culture. And that's usually the starting point. And then also like these differences often like just bring something new to people. So we like, obviously it's very identity focused work, but it's still, there's this newness that happens just through conversation.
And awareness.
Yeah.
You're making people aware. So that was my next question. How do participants benefit from your fellowship? And it's being able to kind of meld in the same kind of pot. Go ahead and elaborate a little bit.
So a lot of these participants are already in like individual like talk therapy. So it's not like their first time having conversations around mental health, but I think receiving mental health services can be a really solitary thing. You're on your own, I think
it should be, at least to like start out. Let me get it out of my system.
But like you have your session once a week, once every 2 weeks. But after that, it's like, how do you integrate that? How do how do you move forward with the things you learn in therapy,
Yeah.
Like, you're not bringing like your whole family to like a regular doctor's appointment for the most part, but it's just nice for these people to have this point of just like feeling that they're in community,
Seen
I think people
and
don't
heard.
really, I mean, in recent years, people talk more about their therapy journeys, but it's like, it's clear everyone here has a mental health struggle and is working through it and is either having a hard time or an easy time. Yeah.
Okay. What is the general age of your participants in your program? Because I'm looking here that there is a possible disconnect between the Latina participants and their parents. So are most of your participants on the younger spectrum or?
Yeah. So right now they're all around they're all young adults. They're all in their 20s for the most part. Yeah.
20s, babies.
Yeah. So a big piece for these fellows is kind of like, how do you take what you learn in therapy and how do you bring it home?
Okay.
And this is sometimes a difficult thing, if you're trying to tell your older parent, like, oh, that's a boundary. I actually don't want to talk about that, mom. And your mom's going to be like, what? Like,
what do you mean?
What do you mean
I'm your
boundaries?
mother.
I raised you.
Exactly.
I changed your diapers.
We don't have boundaries.
Yeah.
Yes, we need them.
But there's also this sweet thing we talk about, like this disconnect not always being a disconnect.
Yeah.
Because as like, a child is often similar to their parents. Like if you talk about, like if a child has depression, there is a likelihood that one of their parents also had a depression or one of their grandparents also had a mental health struggle. So
it's
like
in your DNA and passed down.
Yeah. So it's like in receiving these services, there is this initial difficulty where you just like, you can't tell like your parents all you learn in therapy. You can't tell your parents like, oh, I actually just aired you out for like an hour in therapy and like, hey mom, like, hey dad.
Now let's talk about it some more and let's talk about you and your issues.
Yeah.
It's tough. It is tough because no one really wants to look at themselves, with the glasses off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in a sense, like, these young adults receiving therapy are also starting the conversation for their parents too. So sometimes people talk about like their parents also beginning to receive therapy or beginning to receive mental health services as a result of like the child initially doing that work.
Exactly.
So sometimes there is this difficulty around it, but sometimes it offers like ease for the family and kind of is like a breaking point.
Absolutely.
So
to break through it is never easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what would you say the main benefit from the fellowship the participants gain? Like if they even come for one day, what are they walking away with?
They just feel less alone. So we have evaluation forms and I look at them and that's kind of like what everyone is writing in their evaluation forms, that they were like the same thing, just not feeling less alone in there.
Yeah, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one. There is someone else going through this exact same thing.
Yeah.
So I'm not crazy. Okay, let's move on to mental health in the Latina community. How are the Latina communities in regard to mental health a little different, a little unique from, I guess, the rest of the world?
I think there's a similarity, of course, but there also is like this like, it's just very unique in the context of like California, in the context of the US. It's a lot of like recent immigration. It's a lot of people immigrating out of survival. I think, I don't know where to go with that question actually.
Okay, that's okay. Let me see. How are Latin communities unique? Okay, in regard to mental health. I guess let's just move on.
Well, I do want to talk about that, but
okay,
I'm
maybe I
sure
can preface it differently.
The framing, yeah.
Okay. Mental health in the Latina community. How are Latina communities different from other communities in regards to mental health? Like what in your community maybe will have an adverse effect that's something maybe I won't even have to deal with?
I think the different piece is the part that gets me because I don't think it's necessarily all that different.
It isn't. Let's use the word unique.
Yeah, unique.
Yeah, let's say unique. What makes it unique in regards to mental health?
I think there's like this barrier around just like cultural shame. So I think there's a cultural shame within a lot of communities of color when it comes to mental health. It's not promoted. It's not talked about. And within like Black and brown communities, it's like you don't air out your laundry. You don't put out your dirty laundry in front of others.
Yeah.
There may be all these things happening within your family, happening within your own self, but you don't tell other people that.
Exactly.
You don't share that publicly. So that's one of the big things. I also would say that a lot of the Latina community is very religious, and that sometimes can be a strength and sometimes can add difficulty in accessing services. Because sometimes people who are struggling with mental illness will be told things like, you're possessed.
Exactly.
Or, like you're too far from God.
The devil has you. Yeah, exactly.
The devil has you, or you're too far from God. Which is a framework that sometimes helps for people.
Some.
Yeah. But then for, if you have people telling you those things, like, with this sense of shame around it, you're not going to access services.
Yeah, exactly. And it's something that is within you, and it's something that you naturally do.
Yeah.
And to be told that it's shameful, then you immediately close up and you don't want to speak about it to anyone. So yes, religion can have an adverse effect in terms of mental health, depending on your parents as well. So Absolutely. It does start at home a little bit higher up.
Yeah. And then within Alameda County, and I would say within California as a whole, the Latina community is a community made up of a lot of recent immigration. And quite honestly, like just the immigration process itself, or the fact of being of immigrant, can be traumatic itself. It's not easy to come to the U.S. It's not easy to come here as a young adult or as a child. So that's also something else that impacts people's mental health. And I think because so many members of the community are immigrants, it's kind of like something people don't really recognize or talk about. Like, why would we talk about the trauma of being an immigrant? Like, we're all immigrants, like, of course.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But it's like, no, it's actually, there's this heaviness to it that people don't often talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. There's a heaviness that people don't talk about in terms of the Latinx community, as well as those of the Black and brown people who were brought and forced over here, so we're all kind of dealing with that stigma of how we arrived, the struggle to get here. But how do we overcome that, correct? Yeah. Exactly. Okay, so that is something that they discuss in their PEERS group. Tell me one more time what that is an acronym for.
PEERS?
I want people to get this, yeah.
So peers envisioning and engaging in recovery services.
Copy that. Did we get that? Wonderful. Let's move forward. Okay. Immigration to the USA with poverty. You want to touch base on that? How does it differ from other ethnic communities who migrate to the U.S.? We were just saying that because some are migrated, some were drug, and some were just here. So how does that differ?
Well, I think I want to talk about push and pull factors. It's at least for my parents, at least for my family, it's like they... sometimes when you immigrate, it's because you have the privilege to immigrate. You have the money for a lawyer, you have the money to get the documentation, you have, this mobility to move countries. And then sometimes it's quite literally that your only option is to leave where you're from, to go elsewhere. Yeah. So I would say this struggle around receiving mental health care isn't something that just starts in the U.S. It's if you come from a poor background in another country, you're also not accessing mental health services in Mexico. Of course, you're going to have a hard time accessing something you've never accessed in your home country here.
In the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just want to mention that, people don't, if you have healthcare in Mexico or that often is if you have the money to see doctors in Mexico, it's you might be someone who doesn't necessarily need to leave Mexico. So it's, people are coming because of class issues and just things like that. So
is it dangerous?
In Mexico? It depends. Where I come from in Mexico, I would say no. It's just there's a lot of different things happening all at once in Mexico. So
okay, what would be the main reason someone from your region would migrate or want to migrate to America?
From our from the rural parts, or from my
what's the name of it?
Coquillo. So
Coquillo.
Well, that's not even where I'm from. That's the town closest by
to the smaller part where you're from.
Yeah, so I'm from a really rural part called Los Arcos. Its probably population is 200 people, 300 people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there's the municipio is called Coquillo, and that's kind of the county seat, I guess.
Okay.
And people would leave there because just there's not jobs necessarily to go to. For a long time, people were surviving off of agriculture and things like that. But it's not necessarily that sustainable if you're a working class person. You have to have like capital and money to initially already to survive there.
You need money to make money.
Yeah.
Basically.
So it's just really hard to make a living there. And even now people, I know from my hometown, like are on like a work trade program. So they go to places in the Midwest to work for a couple months and then go back to their ranch.
I see.
So there's even people who are, you know, making money out there, but they're still making money here and have to go back, you know.
To pay their dues?
No, just to live necessarily.
Okay, I see what you're saying. I see. Okay.
It's like they can't stay there and make money. They have to leave to make money and then come back.
And then come back and utilize what they made. Copy that. Yeah. I see. Wow.
And that's been the current trend for, I would say, I think even my grandfather came here to work in like agriculture. So it's been like 80 years, 70 years of this.
No true way to save any money.
Yeah. So
you're constantly just working to get by.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move forward. Mental health in today's society. The internet. The internet. Our lovely double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Why do you think that nowadays so many people are affected by mental health in today's society? 2024.
You know, we have come out of the pandemic, allegedly. But people are still getting sick. COVID is just alleged. Now, you know, like instead of saying the flu, it's like, oh, I have COVID.
Yeah, you know? The flu doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. Like everybody has COVID. Let's say that.
Let's just say it. The dog does too. Keep going.
It's just a hard time to be a person. And I think it's not necessarily that this particular moment is harder than the past. I just think people have access to things. So like we talk about social media sometimes being like a bad thing, or the internet being like having negative consequences for people. But sometimes because of social media or because of the internet, people have access to all these terms and all these, like all this language. Like people who are struggling with mental health can quickly Google their symptoms.
Right.
Yeah. And kind of get an idea of what they may be going through. So like while the rates may be higher and higher for depression and anxiety and like for other diagnoses, I don't necessarily think it's the worst thing. I think people have always been this sick and people have always been struggling this hard. It's just now we have like the resources to tell.
Okay, to tell what you're struggling. Sometimes I do believe, though, that Mr. Google isn't always right in my symptoms, and you can think that you're dying from a stub toe.
Yeah.
It's a lot going on. Now, would you say that social media has been a hindrance or kind of helpful in the terms of mental health? Do you think because of social media, people's mental health has declined?
Yes and no. At least like within like my circles and like my family and like my friends, I think sometimes social media can be really informational. So when it comes to like social organizing or social movement or protests, it's like that's where everybody finds out what's going on.
Yeah.
So sometimes social media may be more reliable than like other news sources. But I also don't think it's necessarily a normal thing to have like a phone in front of you like 10 hours a day.
Times, yeah.
But I think like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, people were using other things to distract themselves. But nowadays it's technology.
Yeah, that's true. Now, do you think it plays a part in maybe like body dysmorphia or instant gratification, which is a sickness in itself?
I definitely think so.
Yeah.
Even just like within like things I hear from like, again, like from friends and family or from community members, I do think that social media kind of amplifies things that was already there.
Kind of, yeah. But it also begins to paint an unrealistic picture that people try to live up to.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't have never seen that prior to social media. And I do believe that is a hindrance in our younger generation because they have a hard time differentiating reality from social media these days. You know, so it's
like 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds were not picking up like Vogue magazines and looking at supermodels.
No, exactly.
But now they're on Instagram, they're on YouTube,
they're on all
TikTok.
of that. So even 6-year-olds to maybe even I'll say young 20s, especially if you come from a household where there isn't any foundation and you kind of have no one to speak to, and the internet then becomes your parent.
Yeah.
So the internet is parenting you, and it has no idea who you are, but we are constantly scrolling.
Yeah.
Constantly looking. So yeah, the social media definitely plays a part, I believe, in the state of many people's mental health.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I said, double-edged sword.
Yeah.
I can definitely find a way to make bread in my bread machine real fast. Okay, so yeah, we're in agreement on that, I believe. Let's move on. Sexism in the Latina community. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
Latina, copy that. How does sexism in the Latina community differentiate from other communities? And I mean, I say other communities, but that's so vast and broad.
I think at least, I don't know, this question or this topic comes from out of the fellowship. You know, people have been talking about, so we have like some trans men in the group, we have some cis men in the group, and we have cis women in the group. And they kind of all inadvertently like ended up bringing up like the gendered messages they receive. So we're talking about mental health, we're talking about their upbringing, and it has been important for many people to mention like their gender and how it has shaped them. So like some of the men in the group feel as though they did not necessarily have these positive role models when it comes to this like healthy masculinity, you know, masculinity that can be sensitive,
Vulnerable.
a man who cries, a man who talks about his emotions, at least publicly. I think sometimes men find it easy to confide in like, let's say like a partner, but like you're not talking with your siblings or your friends about like, you know, your traumas or the shame you carry. And then the women in the group, the girls in the group, talk about growing up feeling like a caretaker for many other people. And it's like the other side of it. It's like they're super emotionally intelligent young women, but it's because they've been doing this emotional work for a really long time. So it's like clear for me that within the Latino community, like something has to give.
In terms of?
Just around just like something's up, like something's going on with our mental health, that like something needs to change. You know, there's a lot of trauma we're all carrying.
Okay.
And I do see this shift, like even when it comes to like my family, like my cousins, like I have a lot of cousins who are boys who are, you know, my age, who are in their 30s, who are in their 20s, who are very kind and sweet and sensitive. And sometimes I see them serving as examples for their fathers. So sometimes I see their fathers get also softer with age, or seeing that their children are so emotionally connected with one another that they want to join this emotional connection going on.
I wouldn't necessarily call being emotionally connected soft. Yeah. What would we call that instead of soft? Just available, maybe emotionally available.
I like softness, because then it's like there's like these edges that are sharp around us.
That is true.
That we like keep people out with.
That
so
is
it's like
very true.
easing up on these corners that we have put up on these walls.
Okay.
Becoming little. I like softness.
You
I'm
like
not opposed
softness?
to softness.
No, I understand that softness is great, but you said it's let me think. Do you equate softness to like a little bit more feminine? Or not necessarily. That's what I'm saying. Like the roles, the gender roles growing up, nature versus nurture.
Yeah.
Like, do you think that had anything to do with it? Like the nurturing in the house?
Why like why we're all like this.
Exactly.
Why everyone treats one another like this.
Exactly.
I don't believe it's nature, because I've seen people who grew up who were raised to be really emotionally connected and were raised to talk about their feelings. So I know it's a possibility to be that way. So I do think it's this nurturing.
You don't think it's nature?
I don't think it's nurture. Or I don't think it's nature, sorry.
You don't think it's nature. Elaborate one more time why it isn't natural. Some people are natural caregivers. Some people are natural, like, protectors. Some people are... But is it what you nurture within them?
I think it's what we nurture and we're raised with. And I think we all have different reactions to things, I think. You know, like you may be in a nurturing household or have nurturing parents, but every child, every sibling still has like different parents.
Exactly. So yeah. I find in my household, we nurture what we naturally do.
Yeah.
Like we don't have to nurture you in any particular direction. We kind of see what you do naturally.
Yeah.
And then nurture that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A combination of both.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I believe it is definitely a combination of both, maybe not one versus the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, I don't always love when people call things natural, because in my experience, I've seen people sometimes use that as like permission to like not grow
but
or
it's
to not
natural.
change. No, this is how I am.
This is just how I am. No,
but it's like, no, like it's natural to evolve, and it's like natural to grow, and it's natural to shift through life.
Without even the nurturing, right?
Yeah.
Natural.
And also when it comes to like how girls and boys are raised, I don't want to believe that like all these things are natural. It's like, it's because some people might say that it's natural for women to be, a lot more warmer. And
it's natural for that
men.
woman to be a lot more warmer, but it's such a broad spectrum.
Yeah. And it's natural for men to be colder. And it's like, I don't think it's natural for men to be colder. I think they want to be warm too.
They do. They would like to be warm. I think it might be a case by case. And I think
women want to be cold too sometimes.
I do. We all have, the yin and the yang. We all have that masculine and that feminine. It just, it depends on what you nurture that comes naturally to that person.
Yeah.
So it's a lot in the wording and the verbiage of it. Cool. I'm glad we cleared that up. Yeah. Let's move forward. Let me see. How you feeling over there? We doing good?
Pretty good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Anything you want to bring up in particular right now?
I think one thing we haven't talked about is regards as like cultural background being like a resource and a well we can like draw from.
Okay.
I think sometimes when it comes to Black and brown communities, and when it comes to things like mental health, it's like, there's these high rates of depression in the Latino community. Like, why is that? Like, there must be something hard about being Latino. Yeah. There must be something inherently difficult around coming from like a culturally rich background. Or there's just like this like deficit model when it comes to looking at like communities of color. And within my fellows, we definitely have shifted that. And definitely talked about it as like, where are these spaces? Where are these places that you feel that you feel empowered? Where do you draw love from? Where do you draw joy from when it comes to your culture and your mental health? And people will talk about like, sometimes this feeling of this familial obligation you're raised with as a Latina person is sometimes hard, but also it's really sweet to know you have a village that wants to support you.
Yes,
you have so many aunts and uncles. You have so many cousins that will come to you in times of crisis. You have so many siblings who will come to you in times in crisis. And then we also talked about religion, like sometimes being something that stops people from receiving mental health services, but also religion being this support for so many people when it comes to mental health struggles. When you have like a grandmother or like a mother who may not be super emotionally available, but, will tell you she loves you by telling you like, oh, I'm praying for you.
Exactly. She'll pray for you.
Like to that grandmother and like to that mother, like religion is everything.
Everything.
Like everything.
That's what they were brought up
So
on.
them saying like they're praying for you means it might not mean much to you because you might not feel strongly about that, but they feel very strongly about that.
Exactly.
They're talking to God about you every day.
As long as there's no judgment. Yeah, that's where I think the lines get a little blurred versus religion and spirituality.
Yeah.
But to know is it abuelita?
Yeah.
Your abuelita is praying for you. That is her highest form of love.
Yeah.
Because that's what she knows.
Yeah. And then I think sometimes like the family role or like just within your family can be a place where you heal as well. I think sometimes people may think they have to leave like, let's say the dysfunction to heal. But sometimes there's things that are healing about being around your family.
There is beauty in dysfunction.
I think on Thanksgiving, I was with my aunts. I was with my sister initially outside. We often have a bonfire. Whoever's hosting will put a bonfire outside. So me and my sister are going to the bonfire just to like have sister talk and kind of be away from like the family. Cause sometimes you need a break from family.
I get it.
And then my aunts come outside and we're like, oh, like here come the party poopers. Like our aunts.
The old people.
And then, and they sit with us. And they just like, like, how are you doing? Like, how's the new job? Like, how are you? What's going on with you? And my family likes to talk about work a lot. So they ask you like, how's work going? I'm like, oh, I work in, I'm like, I work in mental health. I'm like, oh, that's good. Like, like we're in mental health. I'm like, oh, I'm in charge of the program that my organization has for like Latina people, for Latinos and Latinas. And then my aunt's like, oh, like, how's that? That must be hard, huh? And it's funny because like I'm within the family and she's like, oh, that must be hard, huh? And I'm like, yeah, it is, huh?
It is, huh? I wonder why, huh?
But I tell her, I'm like, but it's also sweet because there's people of all ages who are opening up to talking about their mental health journeys. So like to some people, like when you work in like a helping profession, they're like, oh, that must be hard.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, it actually is a breakthrough. It's actually
feels
sweet.
Good.
Or like, I draw joy from this. I draw energy from this work.
There seems to be a little bit of a negative stigma when we hear the word mental health.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, there's something wrong. No, my mental health, like my body is healthy. My brain is healthy. I'm having mental health. I'm basically going to the gym for my brain. Yeah. For my mental health, I'm working it out, getting stronger. So mental health is a good word.
Yeah.
Let's change that narrative.
And then in this conversation with my aunts, like then they start opening up about like what they think about mental health or like their struggles or talking about other family members who are having a hard time. And to some, it may seem like, oh, that's chisme or like, oh, that's gossip. Like,
chisme.
Like y'all are gossiping about each other. It's like, no, like this aunt is naming her worry for another aunt or naming her worry for just a relative. Like,
and it comes from a good place.
It comes from a good place. They're not snickering. They're talking in a really low tone, like really, really serious, really calm about it.
Yeah.
So my sister and I were like, oh, like we kind of felt bad that we were like, ugh, when they walked outside because they were going to poop on our party.
Yeah, you kind of had to take that back.
It's like, oh, they actually opened up to us and it was a really sweet conversation. And we talked about like depression and we talked about just struggling as a person.
Yeah, and I think it's important to get the opinions or the ideas of the generations ahead of us so that we can learn and also avoid making the same mistakes.
Yeah.
And be able to move forward. Oh my goodness, well, this was absolutely wonderful. How can we find the Latina Mental Health Fellowship Program?
So mostly on Instagram. I post flyers on Instagram and also on Pierre's Instagram. Okay. And I do think it'll be linked in our description for the video.
Where can we find you on Instagram? Tell us what your handle is.
So we're at Pierre's LCWP and we're the Latina Community Wellness Program. And then we do have a lot of future programming that's going to go on. So we're going to do some focus groups for the community that will be open. We're going to do like a young adult focused one, a middle-aged one, and then an older adult focus group. Okay. And people will be compensated for their time if they come through.
You said compensated for their time. Yeah. So you're going to compensate people to come and get mental health?
A little bit, yeah. We like to offer people something for coming to us, yeah.
That is absolutely beautiful. Talk about an incentive. Get better and make a couple dollars. That's brilliant, whoever did that.
And then we're also going to be launching our support groups, and I'll be in summertime.
Okay.
I have a lovely content expert who helps me with the curriculum, like adaptation. Her name is Marcella. I just want to mention her.
Hello, Marcella. Thank you.
But we will be launching groups in summertime, and we're going to have a trans and queer Latina group.
Okay.
We're going to have a Latina women's group, and then we're going to have a Latino men's group. Okay. And they go on for several weeks. Or we might be doing it, the models to do it weekly, but because we're doing 3 different groups, we're going to do, I believe, once a month.
Okay, once a month.
So it'll be several months of these consistent support groups, talking about mental health, talking about the stigma that surrounds mental health, and the stigma that surrounds receiving mental health services. So that's our offering to the community. We have a fellowship, but that's kind of closed at the moment. But something else that Pierre's offers that I'm actually not in charge of, but it's something they're already doing, is we do wellness recovery action plan groups. Those are weekly like mental health support groups, just like peer counseling. And we have 2 groups. So one's on Tuesday, 6 to 8 on Zoom, and it's in Spanish. And then we also have a Friday group, 10 to 12 in person. And that's at La Familia in Hayward.
Down the street.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, this is all wonderful news. Thank you so much for supporting the Latinx community. Somebody's got to do it. And by golly, the universe has selected you. Wonderful. Luna, thank you so much for coming to see us. Excuse me one more time. Luna, thank you so much for coming to see us here at HHREC. Do you have any final remarks for the people out there listening?
To trust themselves and to be kind to themselves and to lean into softness whenever possible.
Yeah.
You know?
Compassion.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Love one another. I love you. Surround yourself with people that love you. And most importantly, you love you. Love and light. Ciao.